Make no mistake, if our sins aren't covered by His blood, then God has nothing by which to judge us other than our works. And on the scale of good and bad works, the least little sin is a ton of lead, and the greatest of our good works is a helium balloon. You can't win this one on your own.
Therefore put to death your members, which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry, because of the things of the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. Colossians 3, 5 and 6.
Besides these things that the Bible requires as conditions that will exist during the last days, there are also some things that are suggested in various prophetic passages, things that until the present generation were either glossed over, assumed to be miraculous, or denied because they were obviously impossible. These things now appear to be neither miraculous nor impossible, but merely the byproducts of recently developed technology. Even this should not be surprising to us, for it too was prophesied. At the end of his long and productive life, Daniel was as confused as ever by the things he had seen and recorded. As an angel, apparently Gabriel, though he isn't identified here, delivered one last vision, he said,
"But you, Daniel, shut up the words, and seal the book, until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Daniel 12:4.
He was telling him in so many words, "Don't worry about it, Dan. This information isn't for you, but for the people who will be living at the end of the age. They will understand, even if you don't." It's interesting that the angel's predictions specified transportation and information, the two areas in which mankind has made quantum leaps during the last century or so. Too bad he didn't say mercy and wisdom. As usual, Yahweh didn't leave his word on the subject in the hands of only one prophet. Jeremiah reported it thus.
"For who has stood in the counsel of Yahweh, and has perceived and heard his word? Who has marked his word and heard it? Behold, a whirlwind of Yahweh has gone forth in fury, a violent whirlwind, and it will fall violently on the head of the wicked. The anger of Yahweh will not turn back until he has executed and performed the thoughts of his heart. In the latter days you will understand it perfectly." Jeremiah 23:18-20.
What probably sounded like hysterical gibberish to the very men who delivered the prophecies will be comprehended so well by those who see their fulfillment that many of them will at first refuse to see the hand of God in any of it, even though he warned them about it several millennia earlier. But in the end, they will understand all too well.
The anger of Yahweh will not turn back until he has executed the thoughts of his heart.
I don't want to get too far into the specifics of the technology-dependent prophecies now, for we'll cover them later in detail as we get to them. For now, I merely want to point out that we have never before been in a position to see the fulfillment of these things without the heavy hand of God being involved, in effect proving his presence to those who don't wish to accept his love or even his reality, until the very end of the tribulation, when the Messiah returns in personal glory. Yahweh will require faith from those who seek him. Remember, if love is forced, it is not love, but something else. It therefore makes sense that when the world starts to fall apart, many will see it not as God's judgment upon the earth, but as the result of man's own political and environmental folly, or worse, bad luck. And, of course, there's only one way to fix that. You blame it all on the Jews. The most obvious recent development portrayed in prophetic scripture is nuclear warfare. The first trumpet judgment in Revelation describes it.
The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. Revelation 8:7.
Or how about this scene from the Old Testament?
And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon into blood, before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yahweh. Joel 2:30 and 31.
Considering that neither of these prophets had ever seen an explosion of any kind, these and scores of other prophetic passages are remarkably accurate descriptions of nuclear blasts. Ironically, because American atmospheric testing of atomic weapons was halted in 1963, we have a dearth of information about what actually might transpire in a real nuclear war. Could we expect hail and fire mingled with blood? Fire we understand, of course, and pillars of smoke turning the sun into darkness. The familiar mushroom cloud is typical of nuclear detonations. And we know that nuclear blasts can set up their own small weather systems, like man-made tornadoes. Detonated over population centers, they could be expected to generate not only tornado-like hail, but also rain down the blood of its victims over a wide area. After an atmospheric test in Nevada in 1957, irate ranchers in South Dakota reported that radioactive debris was carried by a weather system 850 miles from the test site, precipitating pink hail on their ranches and killing their cattle. Pink hail! Let's look at another bit of end-time technology.
And power was given to them over a fourth of the earth, to kill with sword, with hunger, with death, and by the beasts of the earth. Revelation 6:8.
Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that they were going out with packs of trained, man-eating Rottweilers. Beast here is the Greek therion, a diminutive form of thera, a wild, dangerous animal. Now, if I recall correctly, Robert Hooke, upon first viewing bacteria in a microscope in 1665, called them cavorting beasties. Yep, biological warfare, coming soon to a world near you. How about...
He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand and on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell, except who has the mark of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13:16 and 17.
The mark of the beast has caused unending speculation over the centuries, but three technological developments from the late 20th century make the logistics of it eminently doable. First, a universal debit-credit system is a technical possibility today. All it would take to record and manage the identities and financial profiles of virtually every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth is the will and political clout to do it. The latest high-speed computers are easily fast enough to handle the load. After all, there are fewer than 7 billion of us on the planet, a number that, as we will see, will be considerably diminished by the time this program is introduced. Moving the information back and forth is a non-issue as well. Whether or not you know it, you do it now all the time. Every time you use a credit or debit card, the data moves on the Internet, a fast, reliable, and relatively secure conduit of information. That's puzzle piece number 2. One to go. Cash is more or less obsolete. It can be lost, stolen, and counterfeited. It wears out, and it's expensive to manufacture. And it's useless, at least in theory, if you leave your own country. So as we move inexorably toward a one-world government, cash will become a less and less desirable form of money. But credit and debit cards can be stolen as well. And don't kid yourself, your PIN number is never more than a swish of the switchblade away from being divulged. So what's the universal personal financial solution? something you take with you wherever you go, something that can't be lost, stolen, forgotten, faked, or destroyed. Back in the 1970s, retail store chains started experimenting with something called the Universal Product Code, that little mark with the lines on it you see on most everything you buy. It's read by scanning it with a red laser light beam, which is why you never see them printed in red ink. And it can be applied onto any relatively smooth surface. There is no technical reason that a laser-readable 11 or 12-digit barcode couldn't be permanently applied onto human skin, tattooed perhaps, preferably somewhere where the hair doesn't grow like the palm of the hand. It could serve the owner as an identification card, passport, credit debit card, voting permit, parking pass, and house key. More recently, tiny RFID, that's radio frequency identification, chips, have been developed to fill roughly the same needs less obtrusively. They can be applied to products or implanted biometrically to identify individual animals, pets or livestock, or even humans. I don't know for sure what kind of technology will end up being used by the Antichrist's government to implement the mark of the beast, but it's clear that with the technology existing today, he would have his pick of methods. Of course, once you've got the mark, its privileges could be cut off in a heartbeat by the people who control the database, if they decide you're out of line with their agenda. Oops. On the other hand, if you refuse to take the mark in the first place, you'll be a non-person, ostracized and shut out of society. Maybe it's not such a hot idea after all, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Let's look at another end-time event that couldn't have happened without a miracle more than a few years ago.
Then those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see, this would be the two messengers, dead bodies 3.5 days, and will not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them, make merry, and send gifts to one another, because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. Revelation 11:9 and 10.
Forget for the moment what they're looking at and why. Consider how. Before the age of either satellite television or the Internet, neither of which is, in any practical sense, more than 10 or 12 years old as I write these words, the capability of people all over the earth of seeing two guys lying dead in the streets of Jerusalem in real time was impossible. If they happen to be at the Wailing Wall when they're killed, which is a distinct possibility, people will be able to see them from their computer terminals anywhere on Earth. I just checked the webcam. It's 11:25 p.m. in Jerusalem, and I counted 9 black hats in the big square in front of the wall. No bodies lying on the ground. Yet. Even if they're not considerate enough to die where somebody has a 24-hour internet camera set up, these two witnesses will be so unpopular that their unsung and unburied corpses will still be making the TV news 3 days after they're killed, and the whole world will be able to watch it all live, if you'll pardon the expression, thanks to a technology that got off the ground on July 10th, 1962. That's when Telstar the world's first commercial communication satellite, was launched. But worldwide real-time television didn't really become a practical reality until the first DSS satellite was launched in December 1993. Today, of course, we can't seem to remember a time when we didn't have it. While we're on the subject of these two witnesses, note that they will
have power to shut heaven, so that no rain falls in the day of their prophecy, and they have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to strike the earth with all plagues, as often as they desire. Revelation 11:6.